Yeah.
Homes do not always appreciate, is what people need to understand. I can't talk most medical students out of buying a house as a resident. It doesn't matter what I tell you, you're still going to buy the house.
Like, what do you think it is? Because I know there's always that, well, you're paying somebody else's mortgage and...
There's two industries working against you here, right? There's the realtor industry, there's the mortgage industry. Both of them want you to buy a home. And so let's give you all kinds of lines, like paying rent is throwing money away. That's not true. You're exchanging it for a place to live. And number two, this idea that owning a home is the American dream, that you haven't made it until you own a home. And I think it's even more prevalent among physicians' spouses than it is among the physicians. I've been putting up with living on student loans for the last 4 years, and I want a freaking house.
So everybody, this is Dr. Nee, we got Dr. Renee here.
Hello.
So we're joined by Dr. Jim Dolly. I think you guys are all familiar with Dr. Dolly, right? White coat investor, changing the finances of many thousands of physicians out there, as well as other medical professionals out there. Obviously, the White Coat Investor podcast. Like, you don't need me to introduce you, Jim. Like, everybody knows you. So let's jump right into this, right? Because this episode
is very kind of you. I don't know if it's true, but it's very kind of you.
This episode, you know what, guys, like we always talk about from experience. So about several years ago, we got a property in Pennsylvania, and then since then we've gotten several other properties with that, and we've seen some successes and we've seen some
not so successes.
I wouldn't go as far as saying failures, right? Because we haven't failed.
Right. We haven't failed, but they're just not as successful as we would like it to be.
Exactly. And with the current administration, with the way in which interest rates are going up, things have changed, right? When we were doing it back in, and when you were doing it, we're talking about the late, or the early 2011s, 2010s. We're all probably 10 plus years into it now. The game has changed. Interest rates are close to 7%. Yeah. Student loans are through the roof and so forth in terms of, interest rates. Let's talk about, what's on the ground. So you were telling us about how White Coat Investor was your backup plan.
Well, then I had a backup plan to White Coat Investor. I mean, my main plan, when we wrote a financial plan as a resident, the plan was for me to practice medicine. And actually, I did all our projections with me making $225,000 a year, because that's what emergency docs were making back then. That was the plan. And that plan was working fine and would have worked fine even if White Coat Investor had never made a cent. Okay. But, I got all excited in 2011 about passive income, about a side gig, and yes, I felt very passionate about the White Coat Investor mission. I'd already been doing that for 4, 5, 6 years online on various online forums, but I decided I want to start a business doing it. And my goal was very modest. It was, I wanted to be making $1,000 a month within a couple of years. And if I didn't make that goal, the backup plan was actually to just go start a direct real estate investing empire. So, we never got beyond one property, and it was an accidental rental. All my other real estate investments, and about 20% of our portfolio is real estate. All of my other real estate investments are passive investments. They are syndications, they are private real estate funds, they are, VNQ, the Vanguard real estate ETF. So I've opted to put my active time into White Coat Investor rather than a direct real estate investing empire. But I certainly thought about it, and I even think about it still from time to time. And then I got to remind myself,
Jim,
I'm trying to simplify my financial life.
Don't do it. And I don't know if you've listened to our podcast lately. We try to give really direct information. So I'm going to ask you straight up. Is syndication a bad word right now?
I've never been a huge fan of syndications because the minimum investment is high. It's typically $50 or $100 or $250,000, and you only get one property. So when the property goes bad, you got a lot of money in that property. Even if you're, a multimillionaire, $50,000, $100,000 is a lot of money. So if you want to be in the private real estate investing world, which I think is perfectly fine, it has lots of advantages over public real estate. I think funds are better for the vast majority of people. You've really got to want to be able to do the due diligence on that single property before buying it, to be interested in a syndication rather than a fund that's going to get you 10 or 15 different properties for your $50,000 or $100,000.
Yeah, because I've seen online, I've seen, Reddit has kind of revolutionized a lot of things, right? In essence, it's kind of made it less, I don't want to say made podcasting less relevant, but it really gives a direct voice to, folks who are willing to go out there and kind of student doctor network, what's going on out there, if you know what I mean. Anybody who knows the reference, you can really get out there and kind of have a voice out there. And I'm just very interested in like the bad stories about syndications. And I just remember, there was a lot of investments. We got approached by several companies in the past and so forth. But I'm just really interested in the public sentiment about syndications right now. And I think, one of the things, particularly for the young doctors who are out there right now, because obviously we are just recording right after match day, right? So you got a whole host of young doctors who are transitioning to becoming residents. They're going to be used to getting a certain amount of money that they've never had before. There's going to be maybe a little bit of some lifestyle creep from being a med student to now having some cash and so forth. But basically they're going to be targets, right? Whether it's some type of financial product or some type of real estate product. What's the advice that you're giving to these students, or actually to these medical residents who are maybe in a high cost of living area, are considering, hey, should I just get like should I rent? I'm living in New York, or maybe I'm living in Cali, or I'm living in Atlanta. Should I rent? Or, should I just get like a duplex? But with these interest rates, I mean, it's hella high.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that stuff?
I mean, the truth is, the right answer, if you're not going to be in a place for very long, historically, is to rent and not buy, right? If you look at the historical data, you got to be someplace 3 to 5 plus years for it to appreciate enough to overcome the transaction costs of buying and selling. And residency tends to be 3 to 5 years long. So it's always been a gamble to buy as a resident. Now, there are times when it pays off, right? In the last 5 years, it's mostly paid off. If you bought a house when I started residency in 2003 in Arizona, and you sold it when I left residency in 2006, you did just fine. You might have doubled your money.
Oh, 2006. Okay, that's what you're mentioning. Okay, before the bubble.
Right before the bubble.
Right before the bubble. But if you came in and replaced those residents, you bought a house in 2006 and you tried to sell it in 2009.
Where were you then?
Well, at all,
Jim? Where were you then? Where were you then? Because I got mine in 2006.
Yeah, I bought a place in 2006. I couldn't sell it when I got out of the military in 2010. Accidental rental for 5 more years. Sold it after 9 years for a loss. Yeah. Homes do not always appreciate, is what people need to understand. Now, I can't talk most medical students out of buying a house as a resident. It doesn't matter what I tell you, you're still going to buy the house. I can't talk you out of it. And that's fine, because sometimes it works out. It probably works out about a third of the time for a 3-year residency and about half the time for a 5-year residency. And the truth is, your income's going to go up so much anyway that you can bail yourself out of your bad decision.
Right.
And so, you lost money, but it doesn't matter, because now you make $350,000 a year. That's the truth for most doctors, is they do okay because their income bailed them out.
The thing that's interesting, what you said, like, you can't convince them not to get a home. Is it like, what do you think it is? Because I know there's always that, well, you're paying somebody else's mortgage, and what do you notice for residents to jump on that?
There's 2 industries working against you here, right? There's the realtor industry, and there's the mortgage industry. Both of them want you to buy a home. And so let's give you all kinds of lines, like paying rent is throwing money away. That's not true, right? Paying money, you're not throwing it away. You're exchanging it for a place to live.
Right.
Like when you pay mortgage interest, just like when you pay property taxes, just like when you pay realtor fees, that's throwing money away just as much. Right. So that's number one. And number 2, this idea that owning a home is the American dream, right? That you haven't made it until you own a home. And I think it's even more prevalent among physicians' spouses than it is among the physicians. They feel like, I've been putting up with living on student loans for the last 4 years and a few years before that in undergrad. I want a freaking house.
Yeah.
And I think that's what drives it, quite honestly.
Yeah. I think, I work with pre-meds, and I had a pre-med actually who just got into medical school, but I've been working with her for several years. And during the time, she's a non-traditional pre-med, during the time that she was kind of trying to get herself together to get into medical school, we had a conversation one day, and she goes, I think I want to buy a house. And
as a pre-med,
great. As a pre-med, I said, are you crazy? Now, she was 27 at the time, all of her friends were getting married, having children, buying houses. And I said, your trajectory is not their trajectory. And you can't, this is apples to oranges. So the other day when she got into medical school, we just had a conversation on Friday, and we absolutely laughed about that previous conversation about her getting a house. But I think you're right. It's this idea of the American dream, and I'm going to be missing out if I don't do it. So certainly when I become a resident and now I'm making some income, I deserve this house. So it's just very interesting.
The other thing people don't realize is you can rent a house, right? You don't have to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. Right. You don't have to rent a studio. You can rent a house with a backyard that you can put your dog in, and, where the kids can have their own playroom. You don't have to buy it. Houses are available for rent. And people just don't think it through. They're like, oh, well, the mortgage payment is less than rent, so I must be coming out ahead. They forget all those other expenses of home ownership. And until you've owned a home or two, you don't realize that sometimes you got to spend $14,000 replacing the roof.
Right.
So I want to move to where you're at, because how are you getting it for $14,000? we're in Jersey. We're getting quotes for like 25, right? I'm serious, right?
And we're getting pummeled with like solar paneling.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. What's the deal with that? Yeah. You know what? Clarify
Everybody
that.
wants.
What's your thoughts on solar paneling? What's the deal with that?
It's funny you mentioned roofs, because I had to put 2 roofs on in 1 year. When I had this accidental rental, I had to put a $4,000 roof on it. It was just a townhome, and I had to put a $14,000 roof on my house here, which I subsequently tore off and replaced when we did our big renovation. So I've really done lots of roofs. They are more expensive now than when I paid $14,000 for sure. Solar panels, you got to make sure it pencils out, and most of the time it doesn't pencil out without the big tax break from the government. If you're not getting a big tax break, it's probably not going to pencil out. It's very easy to overpay for solar panels, to be sold a way too expensive solar panel system and come out behind on it. If it's going to take you decades to recoup your cost, it probably doesn't pencil out. You might want to still do it. Maybe you just care that much about being solar and saving the planet or whatever, that it still makes sense. But you've got to make sure it actually pencils out. There's actually quite a bit of shopping around you need to do to make sure you're buying a system designed to be bought, not sold, and paying a fair price for it. Where you live matters, what direction your roof faces matters, your weather matters, how much you're paying matters. What you're doing with the electricity matters. You really got to run the numbers on this one. And
so,
if it looks
sounds like whole life for roofs.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to come out ahead in 6 years, fine. And you're going to be there for 20, fine. Buy the solar panels, right? But if it looks like you're like, oh, this is going to take 22 years to pencil out, and I might only be here for 6 more years, and maybe the person buying it's really going to value these solar panels. Well, maybe they won't.
Right.
And so don't expect that you're going to get the money out of the solar panels you're putting in. You really need to get the money out yourself while you own the home, not count on being paid more from the next buyer.